And she muted me. Sorry about that, Chaos. That would be the cat who is trying to be a helper and did not help. I'm going to try and move the keyboard out of her way so she does not do that again. And I can hear the dog click clacking her way over here because she hears me talking to the cat. All right. So sorry about that, Chaos. So again, normally I start this off with a little update, and then we'll start to go into questions. Then I will, if there's at the end, I usually go over some updates related to business things, some things that you may be interested in. Most people come to me for things related to either tarot readings or to um, uh, like different things I've done, like with Messages in the Moonlight website about Wicca witchcraft. All these links are in the show notes. Um, again. Oh no, the cat muted me again, and I have no idea at what point she muted me. So hopefully I was not muted very long. I have no idea what key she is stepping on to make that happen, but the cat is over here muting me. All right, we're going to try to keep that unmuted. All right, so hopefully that helped to answer that question. Again, I'm not sure. I won't know until I go back through to add the timestamps to find out how long I was muted for. So if I missed part of that question because I was muted, just let me know. The cat muted me again. I have no idea at what point she muted me. It's just every now and again I glance and it's muted. So I'm not sure how much of that, again, was muted. She only jumped away like maybe 20, 30 seconds ago, maybe. Um, so hopefully you got most of that. If not, again, I won't know until the replay, but if you just want chop, you can always pop in the chat if you need me to go back over it. But again, the biggest thing is being able to help. It's kind of like holding hands. It's like, think of the reading in these moments when they're difficult or challenging or even just uncomfortable, as being an adult taking a small child and walking to the playground. You know that once you get to the you and the child know that once you get to the playground, the child is perfectly okay to go run around that playground however they want. Maybe they will fall and scrape their knee. Maybe they, misjudge a jump. Maybe some other kid starts picking on them. Any number of things can happen at that playground, but you know that once you get there, this child is more than capable of handling themselves and getting through those moments. Maybe they need to come and talk to you again, but for the most part, once you're at the park and playground, they are fine and they won't need you to like stand over them like a hawk. But from the house to the playground, you're going to need to hold their hand. You're going to have to help them and say like, hey, do you notice that car over there? This is why we're not crossing the street right now. Okay, let's let the car pass. Okay, now let's cross the street. So you very much, as you're talking with the child walking to the playground, you're really showing them how to see what is happening around you, to know what is and isn't safe, how to navigate it, offering suggestions of ways to remember these things. Just like teaching that little kid how to walk safely to the playground. You're kind of doing that with the reading as you're going through these difficult and uncomfortable situations. You're saying like, hey, let me hold your hand. I've got you. And then if they ask questions along the way, perfect, because that helps you know what it is, like which knowledge gaps they need filled, and what focus areas they need in the moment. And you just kind of walk them through it and say, hey, here's this thing I'm seeing. Do you see this? Okay, yeah, now take that. And then this connects over here and lets you see this thing here. And now doesn't that make more sense, right? I don't necessarily word it that way, but so think of it kind of, it's an interesting analogy, and I'm probably gonna have to play around with it because I only just now thought of the analogy. But that's kind of my approach to the reading, is trying to find a way to help them kind of dive into it one step at a time and just coming back to the core empowerment message. What is the big takeaway that they need? I have had, there was one particular reading that I did for a young person, and it was one of those, they were in that period of life where, a decision of how to handle themselves is to be made. And so it kind of hurt. This is one of those ones that I made cry. And they had to, they're hearing it and they're getting it, and the truth is they're feeling empowered. But I made sure at the end, instead of having them take a picture of all the cards, I moved away all the cards and then put just the two major cards that I was like, these are the ones I want you to take a picture of, because the rest of the stuff is old stuff. You don't need that anymore, but this is what you need moving forward. So sometimes when they are those difficult or uncomfortable conversations where there's a transition period involved, sometimes it's a matter of helping them understand what came before and like why it's okay. It's okay that they did this or they felt this, or this relationship fell apart or didn't, whatever the dynamics were. All like kind of helping them process it a little bit, while then also setting them up for, okay, here's next steps, here are options that are available. Here's the big takeaways that help you move forward, because that's usually the biggest part of a tarot reading, whether you are doing this as a predictive service where you are doing like a full meteorology in terms of the life scope with tarot and like really saying here's who you're going to meet. Hi. um so even if that's your thing, that's okay. Like but the biggest thing is just kind of helping them know what is that next step. So either you're doing more empowerment, even if you're doing gimmicky stuff, like make sure the person across from you is like has some sort of action step that they can take from it. What is their big lesson? Um, and when it's difficult and it's uncomfortable, that's the biggest thing, is making sure whatever that thing is that they take away is practical, is realistic, is easy to do and remember to do it. Um, and that it's empowering in some way. Don't let it be that thing that, is an unattainable goal. Make it something that they can do, no matter who they are. Um, so don't just have like a bullet list of like, here's suggestions I'm going to make. Tailor it to that person and that reading. Okay. Um, but great. So hopefully that helped answer that question. And then in the chat, I don't know what's going on here, but great. Thank you. Thank you. So this is the Lunar lunch break is in office hours. It's like an AMA Q&A session, usually dealing with terror-related questions as well as modern religion, paganism, spirituality in general. And so it's just kind of my office hours opportunity. Normally it goes from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, but we started late today, had a morning appointment run late. So we've got maybe about 20 more minutes. Before the end of this session, because it usually runs just an hour. So I'm going to be answering any questions. If you have a question, you can pop it in the chat and I'll prioritize that. Otherwise, I've got a running list of questions. And so I just kind of go off of that. All right. So, let's see. We are going to see. I didn't realize this question was still on my list. I don't know if I've answered this before or not, but I'm going to answer it again because it made me laugh. So this one was, can you read tarot wrong, or is interpretation always subjective? And yes and yes, I'm going to go with. So reading tarot wrong is not necessarily like, it's not like, okay, if a card comes up, there's only one possible interpretation. Like, I don't mean it in that sense. When I'm talking about reading tarot wrong, I'm usually referring to those, like, I normally get on this, if you've ever seen or read any of my things on this topic, but those, like, I know absolutely nothing about tarot, but I'm going to position myself as a professional reader, and I'm going to make the person on the other side of me believe that I know everything there is to know about tarot, and they are going to trust that I'm telling them the truth. And it's like, if you really don't have even a long-standing working knowledge of tarot, that is so potentially harmful. If you have never learned how to speak with people in this kind of context and helping people in this kind of way, that would be a wrong way to do things. If it is going to cause harm intentionally or unintentionally, that is the wrong way to do it. In terms of the actual interpretations, can you read the card wrong? Not really. It is rather subjective. And I don't mean that like if a group of tarot readers sit around at a table and they're doing an exercise where they like pull a card at random and they're like, okay, the 10 of Pentacles. Okay, what does this mean to everybody? Like, just this card standing on its own, not in the context of the question, no intuitive or psychic insight involved, just what do they associate with that card? Each of those tarot readers are probably going to have different or nuanced interpretations, and that is highly subjective. When it comes to the more intuitive reads, typically those who actually do have that really strong knowledge with the tarot, as well as the intuition and the psychic abilities, they will almost always, at least thematically, be in line. I have had people come to me for a reading, and it's their first reading with me, but they've had tons of tarot readings with other people, or at least, one or two people, and they'll happen to mention after the reading is over, they're like, yeah, this card always comes up for me. Or they'll tell me about, this trajectory of these readings that they've been having. There's some lesson that just the theme kept coming up and up. And then they get to me and here is that theme again, but now they're in a different stage of it, right? And so that goes back to tarot readings work through synchronicity. So a lot of that symbols. So going back to that example of that 10 of Pentacles, in that exercise where it's not attached to anything, that 10 of Pentacles can be interpreted many different ways. But then within the context of a reading for a particular person, once we start putting in the context of a question, context of a client's needs in the moment, whatever intuitive or psychic impulses, those psychic hits, some people refer to it as, that's when you start to see that the messages all tend to be the same, unless you have that person that, again, doesn't know anything and is just thinks it's fun and games, or or is just playing pretend. Which, nothing wrong with that. It's a way to learn. But if you're doing that in that capacity as a professional, that's when it becomes harmful. Um, and so how they word their interpretation of it, how they say the thing could be subjective, but usually in those moments, you will see that synchronistic similarity. You will see that um, the readers, even though they have those distinctly different subjective interpretations of a card in general, that way of getting that information, they're still going to hit on that same synchronistic information that's involved. Um, and so, yes, the interpretation is always subjective, but it can also be very aligned, if you will. So again, in terms of, can you read tarot wrong within a reading where you authentically are doing this reading and you are authentically connecting it, you're using that knowledge, that wisdom, and your own developed senses to be able to do that reading. In that case, there's no wrong way to read tarot. But there are harmful ways to go about reading tarot for somebody, and the way that you speak to that person and the way you approach their reading. Okay. Um, but hopefully that helped to answer that question. If I missed anything or misunderstood, you know how to find me. Just reach out and I can always readdress it. Um, I always love that question about tarot and wrong answers. So here's also now I see some different Ooh, okay. Okay. Yeah, those are definitely the challenging times. It's just that includes a lot of really personal details. I'm not gonna read verbatim everything that's there. Because I know the videos do replay, so I want to make sure to protect that privacy for later on. Um, but yeah, those periods in our lives are really difficult when we know we need that something more, and this is where I talk a lot about spiritual health, and whether somebody identifies as spiritual or religious or not, there is we still have spiritual health. It's just like there's physical health, there's mental health, emotional health. For the longest time, you have people who, would be against getting any sort of like visiting a psychiatrist or a therapist because they were just like, oh, I don't need that. We do that same thing a lot of times when it comes to our spiritual health, where we're like, we don't need that because we're not XYZ. And it's like, well, that's not entirely true. We still have that health, and there's still ways to address it. And it can be really hard, especially when we get into um, dealing with anxiety, dealing with our esteem, and having those challenges in life that makes us start to kind of get critical and judging. Um, if I put this within like the context with tarot, we talk a lot about whenever I'm doing a reading and the sword suit comes up, I usually like to explain, if the person isn't familiar with tarot, I explain that the reason that the sword suit in tarot cards tends to be really negative. Really, like if you look at these imagery, it can look kind of scary at times. And a lot of that is because the swords represent the element of air. And it's all about words, thoughts, communications, our relationships with others in terms of how we think about and speak about. And so they're represented by swords because think about words. I always hated that, that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It's like, that's such a lie. Like, words can cut sharp. Like, that's why we use swords to represent words and thoughts and communication. Um, and then our thoughts are what precede our feelings. So the way we feel about a thing, there's always a thought that comes before it. Scientifically speaking, when we break this down, so if you're not familiar, my background is in specifically the science of psychology, so kind of getting more into that neuroscience and things of that nature. So when we get to our our thought processes, sometimes we don't necessarily have the conscious thought. So when somebody's like, "What were you thinking?" and you're just like, "I wasn't," there wasn't a thought. There was a thought, because you wouldn't have had an emotional, visceral reaction without that thought. Um, so it's typically there's thought, there's feeling and emotion, and then there's action based off of that. So it just kind of cycles around. So the feelings will fuel the thoughts, the actions will fuel the feelings, and it just kind of keeps doing the thing over and over again. This is why one of the most popular therapy treatments out there is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is all about it's a specific way to challenge and reframe our thoughts, to get more positive thinking in in there. Not necessarily like happy go lucky, like everything is sunshiny kind of reframing. It's more like, okay, well, you're having this thought, but does it actually match reality? Um, so, like, for example, you're talking about seeing people in crowds and thinking about how um, you feel like they're so much better than you, and yet, does that actually match reality? So, within CPT, they would have you take that thought and kind of break it down and then turn the words around to make it a statement that would actually match reality, and it would challenge that thought. Today we see a lot of stuff on, especially now in the age of social media, you'll see this everywhere. But a lot of the different self-help books, the fancy journals, all these different things are literally just taking CBT, and it's just a different version of that activity of reframing the thoughts. And so when I hear the story, that's kind of the first thing that comes to me is, are there ways that we can change how we're thinking, um, to help make it a little bit better? It doesn't necessarily mean changing your thoughts is going to fix everything under the sun, but it gets you in a place where you can start seeing that possibility. And that's usually the best way to break out of the anxious, or even depressed places that we get to, is being able to challenge the thoughts. If we can challenge the thoughts that deepen those feelings, then we could kind of get forward a little bit more. And that's usually what I do. That's why when I say that question I was answering earlier about handling readings when we see something difficult or uncomfortable, it's really about finding that way to sit with that feeling and see if there's another way to think about it. Is there a different way to handle the situation? Could another possibility exist? What are the possibilities? Um, when we get trapped in our head, we tend to hyper focus on what we think is the right answer to the question, or we're stuck in like thought bubbles essentially. Meanwhile, there's all these other potentials out there that we're not even noticing, because we've trapped ourselves within this cycle of thinking. Um, I need a little bit of water. Hold on. Ooh, the pollen today is out there. For those of us with sinuses are struggling, so I apologize. I might have to reach for that a few more times. Okay. Um, and then the other thing that you mentioned was about not being good at academics anymore. So this is where I get a little pet peeve. Another bit of my background, I was a earth science teacher for several years. Well, it was 4, so it was several, but not that many, a few years, right? For 4 years in a public high school, and it was a real eye opener for me. There was school and education while I was growing up, and like there were already problems with it. As an adult going out into the world, I began to realize like just how like subpar that education was. So then I start to notice some things when my son started like pre-K, but that's at the lower level, so I don't really notice any problems per se. There's just some things that like irk me and I can't figure out why. But when I transitioned to become this classroom teacher and really get into the system and really learn about how this works and the history behind the different rules and regulations that determine what gets taught in our classes, um, a lot of what I presume that you are feeling in terms of saying that you're not good at academics, is something that I witnessed with a lot of students expressing that exact same sentiment, not just the students in the high school, but also those who had recently graduated and were now in college. And a lot of it is because they're finally realized, like, they're not seeing the part that I was seeing, which is that their education is so minimal, so lacking in what it could have been. So I think of my experiences growing up in, public education many years ago, and if that was subpar, what's going on today is horrifically subpar. It makes my education look amazing in comparison. Um, and so that means that it's not necessarily on you in terms of you being good or not good at this thing. It's what was there in terms of your foundation to build the skills to be, quote unquote good at academics. And also academics change. Like it's not just what grades you get, especially as you get up there. So by the time you hit like a high school level and absolutely college level, it's subjective. Who the teacher or professor is, how they do their grading. Is there a rubric? What's on the rubric versus the instructions that you were given? There's so many tiny little dynamics involved that I personally argue against even trying to make that comparison of being good or not good. It's just like with test taking. We know with standardized tests, I used to tutor people for standardized testing, like everything from, SAT prep to just basic spelling tests in elementary school to, um, which I am not the greatest of spellers, but there is a strategy for for those tests, to like specific tests within military branches to go into specific specialties. And one of the things we notice with the standardized tests is that there is there is strategy in terms of how to be good at that test. It doesn't necessarily mean that you know all the things. It doesn't mean that you are better than anybody who got a lower score than you. So reverse of that being if somebody got a higher score, you're not lesser than that person. Um, it just means that they knew how to take that particular type of test. Okay, so it's not even necessarily that you're perfect at that subject matter. I have watched students be like absolutely excellent in a subject and they know the things. If you ask me to grade them based on the standards and do they have mastery of those standards? I'm like, they are excelling mastery of those standards, which would be an A. That is what the A's are for. They're for excelling. Okay, don't even get the grading system. Oh my goodness, that's a whole other topic. We could be here for like 3 hours if I were to break that one down. So if the issue is a matter of grades, don't overthink the grades. I promise you, there's a lot of behind the scenes drama and nonsense related to how grading works. That said, bringing it back, the I would have these students who would absolutely excel, um, full mastery, beyond mastery of these skills and these standards and knowledge, right? But then you give them a test. And in my mind, that test should be so super easy for them, but just something about the test themselves, and I would watch their brains just shut off. And suddenly, like, because I couldn't figure out how a particular question was being asked. And I, with my squirrely brain, have a tendency of wording things very odd, and I would create my own tests. Um, and so I would watch the brain just stop. And I have on occasion had to walk up to a student and basically just, take the test from them and say, you know what, for the rest right now, just breathe. You're fine. We'll talk about doing this later. Um, because that's a different skill. Okay. Um, Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And you're not alone in this. This is it's so common right now. The biggest thing that when I hear you asking this and that this is not a thing you normally talk about, what that tells me is that you do care about this and that you would have the drive to learn and educate yourself if you need to. So don't lose that. So instead, this would be If we were to actually do a proper CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, and like really try to reframe your thoughts, like that's probably what I would try to help steer you toward in your reframing when you have those moments where you start thinking about it, is try to be like, okay, well then, even if this is true, what could I do about it? Focus on the what what action can you take? So if that's, you know what, I'm gonna read this, or you know what, I'm gonna, maybe I can't write this out, in this particular style that I'm being asked to write it for this report, but I could draw it out or build a diagram. I've seen students make me like these creative things where I'm just like, where has this brilliance been all year? So don't stop learning. Don't let comparisons bring you down. Comparing ourselves to other people will always bring us down. Even when we think it's bringing us up, when we compare ourselves to people that are, if in our mind we judge to be like inferior in some way, inevitably that ends up putting our ego like turned on to the point where, oh, trust me, we will fall and collapse from that. So comparing ourselves to others is never helpful. I tend to prefer, if I'm going to compare, and I'm not perfect, we're human, we're going to do these things. If I'm going to compare, I try to compare myself with myself. So like, okay, how was I before? Okay, how, if it's something where, hey, I used to be really good at this and I'm not, how can I get back to being good at that? Because if I was good at it before, I could be good at it again. Um, if something's different, like I had injuries from when I was in the military, and for the longest time we didn't really catch exactly what had happened. So I went many years not getting the right types of treatment when I needed it, and so that left me with uh, conditions where like I can't go running. So I used to run, now I can't, right? So like that's one of those things where like, okay, I used to be good at this and I'm not good at it anymore. I got to let that go. But what else am I good at? So then I start to look at, what can I do? What can I focus on? But other times I look at some other things and I'm like, wow, I used to be really, really bad at that. Like right now, I'm sitting on a camera and I'm talking to you live streaming. A replay video will exist on the internet for like however long it's on the servers. Um, and if you asked me to do this even 5 years ago, I'd have been so overwhelmed with anxiety and performance anxiety and just like, oh my gosh, stage fright. Like, no, don't keep it away from me. And I would be like a train wreck of emotions just at the thought of having to sit on a camera and talk to people in any sort of public capacity. And now I can. So those are those things where I can look at myself and compare with myself and say, hey, I'm better at that than I used to be. Even though there's these other things that I'm like, I used to be better at this and now I can't be. And that's okay. What are your priorities? What do you want to learn and enjoy? So I'm really glad that helped, and I hope all my prattling on toward the end also contributed to helping that out. And we are past the 2:30 mark, so I do want to go ahead and I'm going to start wrapping us up. But absolutely, thank you so much for opening up and being vulnerable enough to share that. And it really does mean a lot that helped you. So thank you so much. Um, let's see. I'm going to switch gears to our outro. All right. So, uh-oh, that's right. I changed my things. This was back when the cat first muted me. All right. Okay, so some updates. So my next in-person tarot appearance is a little treasure shop. We finally added the rest of the summer dates. We're gonna keep the summer prices in the summer special for now, but those prices and the special may change at the end of August. But at least all the dates that are currently on the website are there. The next appearance is gonna be July 30th. So I believe this one is a Friday? No, Thursday. So this will be a Thursday from 11:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. I've typically been saying that I'll be there at 11, but a lot of times I'm like, depending on the specific times when the doors actually open, I may not actually be properly set up like in the first like 15-20 minutes. So I'm just gonna start saying 11:30 instead of 11. So between 11:30 to 5 p.m. on the 30th, I'll be there live in person. If you want to come for that. If you use the booking links that are in the show notes, you'll see there will be one for like in-shop tarot readings that is set up to where you can schedule ahead of time. specifically for the days and times that I'm available in the shop. The July blog post I talked about last time. Oh, bye. um, the blog post that I talked about earlier is still for the July blog post, which is the America at 250. Talking about the subjectivity of time and the age of a nation. I get a little teacher preachy type, just kind of give you some basics of a little bit of the science and kind of putting it into context. But it really ends on a positive note. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely make sure to check that out. Um, and then, I talked about this at the beginning, the Hella Story relaunch party. There is a link in the show notes. I believe I was smart enough to add it ahead of time before I started the stream. Um, that is a link to sign up ahead of time to join on July 24th, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. This is a one-time only opportunity to get me talking about the novel. Anybody who's known me for years knows I get all squeamish when you start asking me details about the novel and the writing process and all the things. And I'm just like, oh, I wasn't ready for that. Because this wasn't me going in as like, oh, I'm going to be a novel writer. This was just, I wanted to write and publish a novel. And so I kind of hit that life goal. So I get a little squeamish. So this will be an hour where I'm going to put myself on the spot and I'm going to open up and let you ask me all those kinds of questions. There is a extremely high probability that I will never, ever, ever do anything like this again, specific to novel writing and self-publishing and all those things. So this is a really great opportunity to join in and help put me on the spot. So if you go ahead and sign up for that, that will I am trying to plan something. I haven't finalized what it's going to be just yet, but I am planning on anybody who signs up ahead of the live stream event will get some sort of special exclusive kind of freebie gift type thing. I haven't decided exactly what it is just yet, but definitely sign up so you can get in on that. Let's see. And then, of course, behind the scenes, I am still working on the Empowered Reading course. Hoping within the next month to have that wrapped up, or at least wrapping up. And of course, the Moment of Empowerment videos. I'll let you know when the next one starts. Again, I talked about this last week. I'm only going to briefly mention it. Just a reminder that if you are out in California or planning to attend the Awaken Lifestyle Expo out that way, in, what is that? About roughly mid-late August, the first 1,000 guests are giving away a free copy of this Oracle deck, and I do have a card in there. Unlike last week, this is the actual image, no, no AI elbows. You can see if you saw last week's replay, you'll know that the elbows and, the flare of the dress that I'm wearing in this photo are very distinctly different than what it was last week. So you could go back to that replay if you didn't see it, so you could see the difference. So just a quick reminder that that is going to be available if you're going to be out that way anyway. Definitely try to be the first ones in the door if you get one of these. I am just one of 44 people with a card in there, and they all have these very uplifting messages. So really good for like a daily draw when you just need a little moment of uplifting. Okay. Typical reminders that I always share. Make sure if you haven't already, subscribe to the Starlight Circle. That's my monthly newsletter. I should be putting that out, if not this week, definitely next week. That'll be going out. More likely next week, but if I'm able to get it out sooner, I will. Enroll in the Tarot 101 with Evylyn Rose. It's designed for seekers and skeptics alike. It just kind of basically, cuts through the noise of what tarot is and what it isn't. I throw in some nerdy science teacher bits in there just for fun, because I can't help myself. But definitely check that out. Also, you can follow me on social media. I'm most active on Blue Sky. I do get a little political there, so if you don't want to ever see a repost that's political in nature, Blue Sky might not be for you, but but that is where I'm most active. It's the easiest to get hold of me. And then, of course, obviously, I'm on YouTube and Twitch. I tend to do more with the YouTube than I do Twitch, mainly just because I don't have the full. I'm not an affiliate, so I don't have the ability to use most of the features to make it practical for me. So I tend to be a little little busier on YouTube than I am on Twitch, but I am there as well. And then finally, last but not least, the next step. So the biggest thing is to RSVP for that relaunch party. Again, that link is in the show notes. If you click there, it takes you there. You just pop in your name and your email address, and it just puts you on a wait list so that you know exactly when I go live with that party on July 24th. The next live stream will be next Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. I have no reason to believe that I'll be late this time, so I should be on time. I usually will post something in the YouTube post on the channel if there's anything that stops me from being on time, or if it has to be canceled or postponed or anything like that. But otherwise, I should be here starting the stream at 1 p.m. If you ever have any questions that you want me to answer and you want to keep it anonymous, or you just won't be able to make it for the live stream, but you want the question answered, just submit the question via email or social. Or you can also, if you're in the local area and you see me out and about, feel free to just say, hey, can you answer this? And I will. And as always, make sure to subscribe and like below. That just kind of helps you and others to find more videos like this. Subscribing also helps you know when I'm live. So whether you're on Twitch or YouTube, subscribing is the best way to get that alert that I am that I'm actively here and actively doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And that is pretty much it. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for sharing questions and concerns with me. And I look forward to seeing you back here next week. And as always, keep radiating hope into the world.